So recently I came across some research from Pew Research, truly reputable research organization, about the reasons Americans go to church or don't go to church. I want to share a couple of things with you. I found them kind of interesting and somewhat surprising. 81% of people who regularly attend a church service say the top reason for attending is to become closer to God. The second highest reason cited is so children will have a moral foundation. Now that one surprised me. I don't think I would have thought of that, but I don't have children. And I think it's good news and bad news. I think it's good that people are concerned about giving their children a moral foundation. I worry a little bit how much they're relying on attending church services to do that. I think you get most of your moral compass as you grow up from your parents, from the people around you and the way they behave. So that one worries me a little bit in terms of the overwhelming number of people who said that was a primary reason. The third most common reason is to make me a better person. The fourth is for comfort in times of trouble and sorrow, both of which are quite understandable. The fifth is I find the sermons valuable. Hey, one for us. And the sixth is to be part of a faith community. Now, among people who don't go to church, the number one reason is that they practice their faith in other ways. I think that's a dodge personally, but 23% of the people who don't regularly attend church haven't found a church or house of worship they like. Many said they don't like the sermons. Can't please everybody. And 26% of the people who don't go to church had no real reason why they don't go. They had no overriding reason that drove them. The other thing that Pew asked about was, what do people expect from attending church? The numbers are interesting again. 86% of evangelicals say they experience God's presence during worship always or almost always. 83% of Black Protestant churchgoers said the same thing. 80% of Christians said they experience God. Catholics were the lowest, who said 51% of them said they experienced God in the worship service. Now, you could go on for hours slicing and dicing data. That's a lifetime occupation, especially when you have the volumes that this has. But what stood out to me is that lack of belief wasn't a primary reason. You didn't find a lot of people saying they didn't go to church because they don't believe. They didn't go to church because they didn't like church. They didn't like the community. They didn't feel they were getting anything out of it. So while it's true that attendance at church services is declining, particularly in Catholic and mainline Protestant denominations, it's about flat in evangelical congregations. It seems as though the services are the issue, not the underlying beliefs of the people. I think, if nothing else, it's important to go to church because you get something from it, not because your wife or your husband or your partner or your mother or your father push you to go. I think this is reflected in the fact that so many people who don't go to church don't go because they haven't found a church they like. It's interesting, as you read through the Bible, you can find no commandment to go to church. We're told to worship, we're told to sacrifice, we're told how to treat our neighbors, but there's nothing, you don't find Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. mentioned prominently in the Bible. That's not a driver for most people. You can't say I go because God told me to go. Now, since I became affiliated with Chelsea Community Church, I've always been impressed by the fact that it appears to embody much of what I think a church should be. And that makes sense. Chelsea Community Church was founded by its members. It's non-denominational, it's open to everyone, it's inviting, and I think it provides what people want. When I was growing up, my family were Roman Catholics. My mother and father attended church every Sunday, and when we were younger, we went with them, whether we wanted to or not. I lost interest in the Roman Catholic Church around age 16. Can't cite a real reason, much like the survey people, but it just wasn't doing anything for me. Now that I'm older, I think I understand what was going on a little better. In my very small town, the Catholic Church had Mass at 7, 8, 9, 11, and 12 on Sundays. That left no time for community. Get them in, get them out. Get them in, get them out. It was purely about the liturgy. And I don't think that wasn't doing anything for me, because after a while, you know the liturgy. Anybody who grew up in a Catholic church, you can recite the liturgy. Mary's nodding. Yeah, we can. It's just so you're not even participating anymore. You're just mumbling the words. I've said this before. My father never forgave them for putting the Mass in English, because now we supposedly can understand it. He was perfectly happy when it was in Latin. He didn't know a word that was being said. He loved it. So that's what goes on. My closest friends at the time were members of the Episcopal Church. So when I went with them one Sunday to the church, and I was amazed. It was a very small church, small building, physically small church. full of people, most of whom I knew, directly or indirectly. But the most important thing about that service wasn't the service. It was the coffee hour. Later on, a British friend of mine told me this is referred to as the Anglican rite of coffee. And it's critical because if you can't feel part of a community of like-minded people or people who are on the same journey you're on, what's the point? As I said, after a few years, you can recite the Mass by memory, so you don't really participate. And that's all contrary to the reason people attend church. This idea of just going and being shuffled in and out of a Mass distances you from God. I don't think it makes you any closer to God. And since so many people said getting closer to God was their reason, but think about it. How do you get closer to God? I often point out that when asked what the most important aspect of the law was, Jesus replied that the first and greatest commandment is to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and all thy soul and all thy mind. And the second is like unto it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Now, I'm not the only person who wears a collar or professes an education in theology to interpret this as saying, love God by loving your neighbor. Because it's really hard to love God. I mean, capital G, God. God's unfathomable, he's omnipotent, he's omniscient, he's unknowable, he exists outside of time, he's perpetual. Those are hard characteristics to identify with. To me, those are things it's hard to get close to. And I think that's the reason why so many Christians express their relationship with God as being a relationship with Jesus. They have Jesus as their personal savior. They do that because they can know Jesus as a man. Jesus was a human being. They can understand that. The gospel emphasizes his humanity. It emphasizes interaction with people. His actions were easy to understand. The lessons he taught could be understood by any who listened to him. So it's easier to say, I have a close relationship with Jesus because I can understand something about who Jesus was, and Jesus can understand something about who I am. This is the aspect of the incarnation that I think is downplayed, but I think is the most important. Jesus as a human existed in the world. And although he never sinned, he experienced all the things we experience: jealousy, anger, hunger, poverty, tragedy. So we can feel closer to Jesus, and we feel that mostly by being closer to others and sharing worship with them. What I think is missing from many churches today is the people, not just from declining attendance. I mean from the sense of community you find in church. Whether people consciously think about it or not, the way they feel closer to God really is when they feel closer to their fellow humans. That's what goes on in church for people when church is working. In the scripture reading today, and it's one that's fairly well known, it's a little overly wordy, but what is Paul saying? He's emphatic about the idea that the church is a body composed of many members, but equally emphatic about the fact that none of the members can stand alone. His point is about unity and community. While this is certainly important at the time it was written, as the early church was being persecuted, people had to meet in secret, it's equally valid today. The church must be a body that has to work together. And one of the messages this conveys is that we have to realize that each of us is different, but each of us is equally important. When we come to church, we meet lots of different types of people, some of whom we may think are great, some of whom, maybe not so much. That's human nature. What we need to do is press through that and realize that every single person is unique and important, and we need to accept them for who we are. I think people go to church looking for a safe space to explore their relationship with God and their relationship with others. Sadly, not all churches provide a safe space. There are churches that are full of racism and sexism. There are churches that embody ancient misogynistic beliefs. And there are far, far too many churches in this country where pastors tell women who are abused that is their cross to bear. I'm always appalled that goes on, but it goes on way more than we would think it does. Chelsea Community Church is a safe space, and it has been for over 45 years. The people at Chelsea Community Church appreciate everyone for who they are. We don't claim to get along every second of every day, but we don't judge people based on their opinions. We may correct people to remind them about inclusive language. I get that a lot. We may get into an argument with someone about what they said or what they think, but it's an argument, intellectual argument. It's an argument about, not about you're wrong, but let's talk about this. And it happens in an environment that's safe. No one gangs up on anyone else. Everyone wants to share their ideas and share their search for spiritual fulfillment. It may seem sometimes to an outside observer or a first visitor that we spend a long time on the section of the worship service called Joys and Concerns. To me, that's exactly as it should be, because that's an opportunity for people to share their joys with others, and we don't often share our joys enough, and to share their concerns with others, which is sometimes embarrassing, and that really requires a safe space. But it's very important. It's one of the most important aspects of the service. It goes on as long as it needs to. It's not prescribed. It's an honest participation in community. Yes, I came here looking for support in some way. Support in my wonderful things or support in my not so wonderful things. But I came here and I'm getting what I need from going to church. I don't necessarily need to recite the Lord's Prayer for the 7,000th time in my life. I don't necessarily need to sing the doxology again, but I need to be with people who will support me in my search for spiritual fulfillment. The lack of a formal pastor or rector or priest in charge at Chelsea Community Church is also an example of community and the sincere belief that the members have had since its beginning of the importance of being with each other. To clarify that, when I was in seminary, the subject of power often came up. Most of my fellow students, who admittedly were 40 years younger than me, would say things like, I don't want power. That's not why I'm here. And I would say to them that unfortunately, when you put on a clerical collar or you start using the salutation doctor because you got a PhD, you get power. People give it to you. You don't take it, they give it to you. And you have to learn to deal with that if you're going to be effective. The same thing is true in churches where there is a clergy person in charge. That person's opinion is automatically overweighted, and people are automatically reticent to argue with them. It's one of the most amazing things I learned when I started wearing collars. It really impacts your relationship with the other person. It's just built into our nature. Maybe it'll go away as people have less experience, but most people automatically defer to the guy or woman in the collar. And that is not necessarily the healthiest thing when you really want to be a membership church. By only having a pastoral counselor like myself who's available, but doesn't run the service, doesn't design the service, only preaches occasionally, it eliminates that power issue. And I think that's very important. We don't necessarily think about it, but every week, although we have an outlined order of service, the lay leader sets the tone, rearranges that service to what they want to convey that week. And they said all aspects of the service are controlled by the lay leader and the congregation, not by an ordained person. That's really empowering to the community and to the members of the church. It's one of the things I think is most wonderful about this place. I serve as pastoral counselor here because I believe in what this church is trying to do and what it's done for 45 years. It strives to be a place for people of all faiths, of uncertain faith, or of no faith, to explore what it means to be in a relationship with others and in relationship with God in whatever manner they perceive of God, or not. They don't perceive. Maybe the perception of God is there isn't one, but they're still here looking for the same things everyone else is. It isn't necessarily about there being a capital G God. You find God in your fellow human. You find God in support. You find God in all the ways that you need to find God. And this is one of the rare places that happens. There are no dogmas. There's no creeds. We don't ask you what you believe. The only thing that Chelsea Community Church really asks of people is, who are you? Be who you are. We don't care what your background is. We don't care what your religion is. We don't care whether you believe in God, the devil, the Virgin Mary, or icons. Whatever you like is fine with us. But come together with us because we're all on a journey that never ends. We're all seeking some relationship with a higher power, whatever we perceive that to be. And that's best done by having a relationship with other people who are on that same journey. So for those who are visiting us with our fine new lay leader, I encourage you to join us for worship on Sundays, either via the hybrid service or in person. And if you're attending Chelsea Community Church already, or you have in the past, consider coming back and invite some friends. The hybrid service is wonderful because it does let you participate very fully from home. You don't have to come all the way to Chelsea. You don't have to worry about when we stand up or when we sit down, which is, I hate going to new churches for just that reason. Invariably, even in the Episcopal Church, you go, you stand up, oh, shoot, everybody's sitting down. It really is off-putting, I find. So it puts that off, and it gives you a chance to experience and visit quietly. Now, I'm aware that it's going to a new church can be confrontative for a lot of reasons. So it's a chance to try it out, and that's why I think it's been so important to have it. Because if you do that, you'll eventually find the benefits of coming to church here when you can. Admittedly, Chelsea isn't close to everyone, but you'll find a way to stay in touch and stay part of it and find something fulfilling that doesn't require you to get on the subway at 9 o'clock in the morning to get all the way here or drive into the city. But it does get you introduced to the ideas. And I think that's a very valuable undertaking for anyone to try. And we've tried to make it pretty low risk that way. So I think there's been a lot of effort by everyone here to do that. And that's another example of why Chelsea Community Church has been around for so long. Fully lay-led. That's a highly unusual. No denomination, no priest in charge, no nothing. Just fully lay-led and lay-developed. It's a true expression of what church should be. And I hope more people will come and participate in it and experience it. Thank you.